Hey guys, thanks for joining me again for another harmonic analysis. We're going to be taking a look at the song Sweet Euphoria by Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell, being the frontman of Soundgarden and Audioslave, had quite an extensive solo career as well. And this guy knows how to write tunes. And I wouldn't expect this from a guy that fronted Soundgarden, though Soundgarden is a phenomenal band, but his solo stuff is very harmonically interesting. So let's get into Sweet Euphoria. Unfortunately, there's going to be no audio for this one. So we're just going to go through and talk about the chords used and how they work. All right, so we are essentially in the key of A major for this. First chord being A major, down to G major, down to F major. Now there is no one key that has those three major chords in it. So we have no other option but to look at modal mixture as the reason for this. Again, in the key of A major, the G chord would be a G sharp, but in this case it's a G major chord. And then the F would also be an F sharp of the minor variety, but now this F is an F major chord. So we have three major chords in a row off the bat in the key of A. We're going to call the G just a flatted seventh chord, meaning essentially that it's coming from the key of A minor rather than A major. So it's an example of modal interchange, modal mixture, whatever you want to call it. I like to think of it as a parallel move because we're pulling a chord, we're borrowing a chord from the key of A minor instead of A major. So we have that major one in A major down to the borrowed G major, borrowed from A minor, down to the F major, borrowed from A minor. We then are met with a C chord, major, which again is also borrowed from A minor as the 3 chord, and then we have a D minor, which is borrowed from the parallel minor, A minor, as the 4 chord, and then we have an E major. And I'll just call the E major the 5 chord in A major, just to simplify it. Most of the chords have already been borrowed. We're in the home key of A major, but we only have the 1 and 5 from A major. The other chords have been borrowed from A minor. This is a really interesting, easy concept, but super interesting way to craft a song. And Chris Cornell does this a lot. And so this makes for very interesting harmonic analysis. So the next chord after that is what's called the F sharp minor, which would be the diatonic 6 chord in the key of A major. So we're finally using a chord from A major. The chord after that drops down to an F major, which that's one of my favorite moves in the song. If you listen to the song, when you get to that F sharp minor to the F major, it's such a dramatic shift that it really catches your ear and it gives you the goosebumps that you crave, right? So that F major chord, I'm going to kind of look at it as like a chromatic mediant because the F sharp minor is the 6th chord, making it the submediant chord in the key of A major. So what we're going to do is chromatically drop that F sharp to an F. That's where the chromatic comes in the chromatic mediant. And then, of course, it's the 6th chord. It's a variation of the 6th chord. And instead of being a minor F sharp, we're going to make it a major F, right? So we're changing the minor to major and also shifting down from the sharp to the natural. So that would be a chromatic median. You could also just say it's being pulled from the parallel minor. So there's varying ways to do this. You then have another C chord, which is borrowed from A minor, parallel 3 chord, up to a D minor chord, which is being borrowed from A minor again, and then we finally have A minor. So now we're representing that minor 1 chord, the parallel of A major, and then we're going to finally land on a major 4 and a major 5. And so that would be the 4 and 5 in the original key of A major. So what you guys are hopefully getting from this is that Chris Cornell picked the key of A major. And then he basically said, well, playing just diatonic chords from A major is going to be boring. We want some harmonic differences here. We want something to stand out and give you the goosebumps. So he chose to pull chords from the parallel minor. And whether they're chromatic mediants or just parallel moves, borrowed chords, all the chords used are either from A major or A minor. Now let's move on to the next section. Next and final section. It starts on C, which again is the 3 chord in A minor. Then we're going to go to A major, which is the 1 in A major. Then we're going to go to the D minor chord, which is the 4 in A minor. So that's the parallel again. This is where stuff gets cool again. We have an A7. Now there is no A7 in either of these keys, but it is an A chord, so that's kind of interesting, right? It's essentially an A major chord with the 7, making it an A7. It resolves to the D major chord that comes right after it. So we can consider this dominant chord a secondary dominant chord, and it's being resolved from, or rather it is we're going to call it the 5 of 4, meaning that the D major chord is the 4 chord in A major, and the A7 is resolving to it as a temporary 1 chord, but it's the 4 chord in the key that we're in. So we'll call it a 5 of 4. And then the A7 comes in again, and then we abruptly shift to an F sharp minor, which is the diatonic 6 chord in A major. And then we're going to shift to E major, which is the 5 chord in A major. And then we're going to shift to F major, which is being borrowed again from A minor. And then we have A major again, which is the 1, followed by D major, which is the 4, and then E major, which is the 5. So those last 3 chords just create a simple 1-4-5 in the key of A major. And then if you keep going, you obviously eventually end on the A chord. So we're starting on A, we're ending on A, we're in A major, but we're borrowing and pulling and making parallel moves and swapping out notes and chords from the parallel minor A minor. So there you have it, guys. I don't have much more to say other than if you've made it this far, you obviously enjoyed the video, so I thank you for that. Please hit that like button because YouTube is a bitch. If you don't get those likes, I can't get this out to more people. So hit that like button. Leave me a comment if you like this kind of content. Tell me you're still here. If you have any recommendations for things you want to learn specifically, leave it in the comments below and I will do my best. As always, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.